Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Hud, chapter 11, verses 84 to 95 will be covered today, and we will cover the account of the nation of Shuaib. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is a query or a question regarding this presentation, or for that matter, any presentation in the past. Recap previous presentation, we covered verses 69 to 83. Like the accounts of other past nations, in these verses, details are covered about the people of the messenger Lut. The account begins with the arrival of envoys of Allah at the house of the messenger Ibrahim. They provided glad tidings of a son to him, and his wife is surprised by this news, so she thinks she is too old and cannot bear a child. These messengers from Allah also tell Ibrahim that they are on a mission to the messenger Lut and that they are going to inform him regarding the imminent destruction of his people because of their evil deeds. These messengers then arrive at the habitation of Lut. The people of the town arrive at the dwelling place of Lut to cause problems to these guests of his, and this becomes a source of anxiety for him. However, the messengers inform Lut to flee from his habitation during the night, as the punishment will descend on these people early next morning. I've used the term flee over here, which essentially means that they have to do it quickly. There was not a lot of time left, and these messengers told him that you should not look back or even think of going back to his village, because now the punishment is going to descend in the morning. The messenger, accompanied by the Momineen, leaves the area during the night, and the whole town is destroyed through a volcanic eruption in the morning. The summary of verses 84 to 95, i.e. those which are going to be covered today. Here is given the account of the people of Madian to whom the messenger Shuaib was sent from among themselves to provide guidance via the Wahi of Allah. These people were indulging in doing wrong, along with many other crimes, and were unjust in their business dealings within their economic system. They did not observe the rules in relation to giving full measure and weight in the buying and selling of goods from each other. Thus, they destroyed the balance within the society. The Quran declares this to be a heinous crime according to the Law of Requital, and such nations attract severe punishment for such crimes of theirs. The messenger Shuaib warns them about these malpractices and asks them to desist. He also invites them to the system of Salaat, which they initially think is merely some kind of ritual for religious worship. However, when he explains to them the correct meaning, then they are taken aback. They refuse to accept his invitation to Salaat, as they did not wish to apply to the distribution of their wealth and possessions under the direction of the way of Allah. The nation of Shuaib rejected the guidance of Allah and did not reform their unjust tyrannical system, and were ultimately eliminated by the total annihilation of their habitations. The messenger Shuaib and the Momineen were saved from this destruction as per the law of Allah. Now we go to the first verse for today's presentation. Human affairs must be based on justice. وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ وَلَا تَنقُصُوا الْمِكْيَالَ وَالْمِيزَانَ إِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ وَإِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ مُحِيطٍ. In the same way, we sent Shuaib from among their brotherhood to the people of Madian. We have seen that in the stories or accounts of messengers belong to their own people. They were brought up among them so that they knew what kind of human beings they were and what kind of a character they possessed. He also said the same to them, to only adopt the rule of Allah. Other than him, there is no other power of authority for you. I see that at this point in time, you are very prosperous, but you have created severe economic balances in your society. And that is an important point for us, that when there is a prosperity, and despite the fact that people are not following the permanent values, then we should be warned, we should be cautioned that there is something going to be wrong at some point in the near future. Change this condition and maintain complete precision in your scales of weight and measurement. Give everyone their full right. If you do not do this, then I'm fearful that such a devastation will descend on you, which will engulf all of you within its fold. Further comments on this verse. The messenger Shuaib also conveyed the same message to his people, i.e., to follow the laws of Allah as revealed through Wahi and not to obey the laws of man-devised system, because it's a crime against humanity. As we know, this thread runs through the system of deen, and the Quran has emphasized this repeatedly in order to convey its importance. Since human beings resist following the permanent values, hence they end up following their own unbridled desires, which lead to serious imbalances in the society. Quran is not against following our desires, but what it wants is that these desires should be guided within the permanent values, because then limits are defined, and these help develop ourselves so that we can establish the system of being here, and such a self then qualifies itself for the life of the hereafter. Like the previous accounts, there is a salient evil noted here, which is the prevalence of not giving precise weight and measure in the daily business of life. When Allah draws our attention to this form of injustice, it includes both material transactions as well as the treatment of fellow human beings. For example, those who are yatim and miskeen, i.e. the product of the unjust system. And it is an important point for us as students of the Quran that we should take into account both the physical side as well as the human self side. That the imbalances and unjust measure and weights and other evil within a society, how does it affect individual human beings as human beings? So that is an important point for us. This aspect is referred to in 83.3. وَإِذْ أَوْ وَزَنُهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ. Or when they have to give by measure or weight them, that is men, they give less than what is due. And we have gone through this verse previously as well. The issue over here is that Quran is putting an emphasis, wazanuhum, that you do not weigh those human beings properly as human beings. You do not respect them and give them their due dignity, and as a result, you treat them unjustly as if they are not human beings. Whenever we give less than what is due, we degrade and exploit another human being, thinking that what can he or she do about it because he or she is poor and weak. Continuing this verse 84, relating to human psyche. We see the examples of this at all levels of society in the world of today, that is 2023. I put down this year because maybe in 100 years' time, if somebody is looking at these verses, by then there may be been in the world, and they can look back that at that point in time what was happening in the world. Rich and powerful nations exploit those who are poor and weak. In fact, they create those labor classes to serve their own ends, i.e. to earn more profit for them. At an individual level, those who are rich and powerful employ those who are poor at far less than the wages at which they themselves work or operate. In fact, they will never work at those wages if they had better opportunities. And if one is not willing to work at that wages, how can one accept in giving those wages to others? And that is the point which we have to keep in mind. Such gross injustice is prevalent in every society, yet hardly anyone even thinks about it. And the question over here is, why don't they think about it? Even the majority of those who study the Quran simply do not let their minds go in the direction of this gross injustice, despite the fact that Allah has repeatedly drawn attention to this aspect of the distribution of the means of sustenance in the world. Here the Quran has linked this aspect with the rise and fall of nations. Then the messenger Shuaib warns them about the consequences of not changing this unjust system and tells them that it will lead to their destruction as per the law of requital of Allah. Implicit in this message is the creation of a Jamaat Momineen, which will replace the existing unjust system. I added this point, which was not there in the earlier slides. The Quran has cautioned us regarding establishing balance in consonance with the universe. For example, in Surah Ar-Rahman, Quran says, Allah tatgaw fil mizan, That whole system is established so that in order that you may not transgress balance. And if you transgress balance, then you will create disharmony within your own world and in your society. Going to the next verse, 1185, one evil aspect of creating fasad in the world. وَيَا قَوْمِ أَوْفُوا الْمِكْيَالَ وَالْمِيزَانَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. O people of my nation, now this is coming from Messenger Shuaib, establish the foundation of your economic system on justice and fairness, and never diminish the right of anyone. If you treat people like this, then severe imbalances will be created in the land, and the society will become disordered. And the word used over here is mufsideen, which means there will be chaos, there will be conflicts, which we see in present-day world. Further reflection on this verse. Continuing from the previous verse, here they are asked to establish a system in which accurate measure and weight is established in all transactions in order to maintain balance within the society. Implicit here is the requirement that details need to be worked out under the permanent value to ensure that people do not cheat and deprive others of their produce. The addressees appears to be the people in power. And the important thing is that we as students of the Quran have to work out all the finer details which relate to the physical and the side of the self of human beings, so that as and when the system of deen is established, we can let people know that this is how they have to be educated and trained, and their selves have to be developed, particularly people who hold reins of power. Three aspects related to the system are noted here. Firstly, establish a system in which people deal with each other justly. Secondly, keep in mind that people themselves should realize the importance of doing justice and not to have any tendency to depriving others of what is their due. This covers both the physical aspect as well as the aspect of respect and dignity at the level of the self. The important point is that system should be such that people are discouraged from doing wrong, and they find it very hard to go against the permanent values of the system of deen. The third point, which is emphasized, is that any injustice will create chaos and conflict in the society. And that is, people should be aware of the fact that there are consequences. For example, there are consequences of putting hand into the fire, that it will burn. And if this fire is not visible, it does not mean that this fire is not kindled or will not burn the society down. At some later stage, things will go against the society and the world. And this will have serious consequences for everyone. Such a system is not sustainable in the divine balance over a long period of time. Next verse, 1186, creating a new psyche based on justice. Baqiyatullahi khairul lakum in kuntum mu'minina wa ma ana alaykum bihafiz. Remember, whatever you accumulate by seizing in this way through deception and exploitation, though it appears to be a great deal, it can never be profitable for you. Stability and sustainability are only for those benefits which are required according to the law of Allah. And the law of Allah is this, that stability and sustainability can only be achieved by that which is beneficial for mankind. But this matter can only be comprehended by you when you accept the law of Allah. If you're not convinced in this, then you cannot be compelled to acknowledge it. Quran does not force anything on us. For example, we are sharing these presentations. It is up to us whether to accept these, become convinced of it, and then stay together and move forward. If we do not like it, we are not going to be united, because I am not sent as a guardian over you. And if you are not united and we are not moving forward, then the world which we have created around you, there is no possibility of any change in it. Further reflections on this verse 86. Here an important aspect of Iman is noted which requires our attention. In an unjust, corrupt system, trying to be honest appears to be a strategy of apparently suffering loss. But those who have decided to become Momineen, i.e. to establish the system of deen, they are guided here to remain focused on changing the system, and which also requires a change within their own psyche. Iman requires that we examine issues right down to the foundation of all problems created by the man-devised systems. If Momineen fail to detect the root causes of the evil systems, then they cannot acquire that psyche, which is a prerequisite for the system of deen. And as Quran has also said, that pause and reflect on every issue, every news which comes before us. We need to look at it in the light of the law of requital and other permanent values of the Quran. And that is how our psyche starts developing. It grows, it expands its own vision. This is that fact to which our attention is drawn in two verses, 87, 16, and 17. Bal tusiruna al-hayat ad-dunya. Nay, you prefer the life of this world, that is immediate benefits. So Quran has pointed to our that psyche where we want quick results for our actions. And Quran has told us, don't do that. Wal-akhiratu khairum wa abqa, but the hereafter is better and enduring. And so always take the long-term view of life. That doesn't mean we should not take the shorter view of life as well. We should look at that as well, and also the longer term view, and then within the permanent values come to some conclusion. And that is, of course, is just not an individual pursuit, but it should be within the context of coming together as well. The verse concludes with another important point related to improving our understanding of our role as students of Deen, i.e., وَمَا عَلَيْكُمْ بِحَفِيظٍ. The issue is not of numbers, but of the fact that the law of Allah is being transgressed. That is, as students of the Quran, we should know where we stand vis-a-vis people around us in a non-Deen system. And we cannot force people to change their opinions or come to Deen, because those people who are forced to change their opinion under some, for example, family influence or because of power or because of money, they are of no use to the system of Deen. People have to come towards Deen. They have to come towards the Quran for an alternative system through using their own free volition. It has to be their own choice. And being in the majority will make no difference to the destruction which is about to descend on a rebellious people. Next verse 1187. Here comes the salient aspect of the system of Salaat. This is an important verse which Allama Parvez has also referred in a number of his lectures. And it, in fact, makes things clear in terms of the issue of Salaat. Qalu ya Shuaibu salatuka tamuruka natruka ma yabudu abavna aw nafala fi amwalina ma nashau innaka la antal halimur rashid. They replied, O Shuaib, whatever you used to say, we thought that you have only brought some kind of procedure of worship of your own. Hence, we did not object to it in any way. In our own minds, we thought that we will continue to worship in the manner of our forefathers. You can keep doing it in your way. But we witnessed that this matter is not merely about worship. Your salat is not just worship. It is also interfering in those affairs of life which have nothing to do with religion. And this is the crux of this, or the focus of this verse. And we will look into the finer aspects in next slides. What does your salat say that we should abandon? What? Does your salat say that we should abandon those gods whom our forefathers have been continuing to worship? And over here, just pay attention to the word ibadat over here, that yabudu abavna. So we have to see yabudu in the context of worship as well as of following Allah's laws. And that we should not acquire wealth in whatever way we wish, nor spend it in any way that we wish. How wonderful. This then means that our forefathers from whom this current system is ongoing were all unjust and ignorant. A very difficult aspect for people to say that their forefathers were wrong, because people, they more or less revere their parents and their grandparents and their families around. And they find it very hard that all of them are wrong or were wrong. And intellect and reasoning, tolerance and wisdom, empathy and compassion for the poor has all fallen into your share. Just see the sarcasm in their language, which Quran has accurately reflected over here. And we see that as well. We also experience it that when we give the pure Quranic message in relation to solving human problems, people find it very hard to digest. Let us look at this verse in slightly more detail, expanding on the issue of Salaat. We will go into some greater detail in highlighting important aspects noted in this verse. Here the people of Shuaib respond to his invitation, and in this response of theirs lies the difference between religion and deen. What appears is that in the struggle of all messengers in relation to their people was that initially people took it very lightly. But as some people got attracted towards the message, then they realized that they are a threat towards them. And particularly people at the top who were rich and powerful and who were stronger in numbers, they thought that this system, and they accurately thought that this system is going to unhinge them, it's going to destroy their living, their exploitation of others. And the religion did help them, because if people are busy in worship, and worship means nothing because it is primarily individual doing whatever they like in their private time, and even by coming together, if they are doing some rituals, it is not a threat to any system. We can see that people have mosques and temples and the churches and synagogues in every country in the world. And these religious people are no threat to the political system of these nations. And that is why people say that there is a freedom of religion. But the moment deen comes in, then it becomes a threat because it professes a different system of government, a different system with different values. Having recognized the radical change that the Wahi of Allah is demanding from them for their own benefit, in order to change the basic fabric of their society, they retaliate very strongly. Note the combative, questioning style of their response. Firstly, they say to Messenger Shuaib that this Salaat of yours is asking that we give up the practices of worship which we are following in the footsteps of our forefathers. That is, you are saying that this worship is meaningless. It will not change the system. It will keep creating poor. It will keep promoting this imbalance in the society, and what we are doing in business dealings is supported by this. Implicit here are the unjust practices of weight and measure which these people had implemented in the society and for which their religious rituals provided legitimate justifications. And we see that in today's religions as well. In one way or another, all religious clergy is supporting the existing man-made system. The Salaat of theirs did not prevent them from the evil which they practiced on a daily basis, a state of psychic dissonance, the way he had warned them as noted previously. Secondly, their psyche had become such that they did not see anything wrong with their religious practices, and since this suited those who were rich and powerful, hence they had to counter this threat to their way of life imposed by the way of Allah. So initially, the response is very lukewarm or not very serious, but gradually as deen get strength and more people join in and they become convinced, and the kind of a conviction which comes to their self and they become so firm that they now find it as a threat. Few more points of interest. Thirdly, they question the aspect of dealing with the accumulated wealth in the hands of a few in the society, and they refer to it by saying to the Messenger Shuaib that this Salaat, as per Wahi, is taking away our right to do whatever we like with our wealth and possessions. Why should we accede to this? And this is something which is interesting, that the system of Salaat presented by the Messenger Shuaib and Momineen asked them to redistribute their wealth and possessions and also look at the development side of the self as well, because that is where they are saying that your forefathers were wrong. This system is wrong. This is not sustainable. Our version of ritualized Salaat is providing us with all the benefits. This new version will impoverish us. And obviously this is from the rich and powerful. Why should we adopt your version of Salaat as a system? Implicit here is the absence of accountability. Because these people, their system of Salaat, the ritualized worship, did not have any accountability. If there was any fear of accountability, that was left for the hereafter. They thought that in this world they could do whatever they like and they can get away with it because they were getting away with it with all the imbalances in the society. Fourthly, implicit in this is the rejection of the system of Salaat as presented by the Wahi of Allah. Here we quote from another verse where the Quran has stated that Inna salata tanha anil fashai wal munkar. Surely the system of Salaat prevents from shameful and unjust deeds. And this aspect, that is promoting good and forbidding from evil, and cannot be done unless we have a system. It's not an individual issue. Of course, individuals can also do it at their own, but it has to be done within a collective system. Towards the end, they tell Shuaib sarcastically that you are trying to be very righteous and a sympathizer with the poor and the deprived. They firmly committed themselves to the rejection of the values presented by Wahi. Let us go to the next verse. قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِنْ كُنْتُ عَلَى بَيِّنَةٍ مِّن رَبِّي وَرَزَقَنِي مِنْهُ رِزْقًا حَسَنًا وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُخَالِفَكُمْ إِلَىٰ مَا أَنْهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ إِنْ أُرِيدُ إِلَّا الْإِصْلَاحَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُ وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَإِلَيْهِ أُنِيبُ. Shuaib said, "O my people, just reflect on this, that my Rabb has broadened the perspicuous paths of intellect and vision before me, and instead of looting and dishonesty and a fraudulent means of earning a living, has bestowed on me extremely pleasant, legitimate, and balanced means to acquire sustenance." So Messenger over here presented his own character, his own conduct, his own outlook, his own developed self before them, that if I could do it, why can't you do it? And that even after this, I should not extend an invitation towards the correct path to you, that if I have the benefits of following this path and I know it has benefited me, why shouldn't I communicate it to you? Nor can I do this, that the things against which I forbid you, I should adopt these myself. Very important point for us to develop self. Whatever I say to others, I cannot go against this myself. Another very important point, I made this resolve that to whatever extent it is within my power, I will reform the wrong system of your society. Another very big task which the messenger and all of us had to take if we want to reform the world in which we live. I know that whatever means and resources are required for the achievement of this lofty objective, these are not available to me for the time being, but I will acquire all those means by acting according to the law of Allah. And we have seen it that throughout the Quran, the emphasis is on Momineen, that you come together and you will get Allah's help if you follow this path consistently and do not give up. I have complete trust in the concreteness of His law, and in the journey of life, my every step is lifted towards that fountain of good and balance. Further reflections on this verse, in response, the messenger Shuaib let them know about his own line of thinking and his own conduct in the light of the way of Allah. It appears that this has been going on with the nation over many years. It's not a work of one day or 1 week or 1 year. When we take this path and we opt this path and we choose to be on this path, then we should view it as a continuation even after our death. Here the messenger Shuaib presents his own model of righteousness as a glaring evidence to his people and tells them that following this path of Allah will always bring good and balance in the individual as well as in the collective life of theirs. This is how a developed self presents his case before others. Another important aspect to which he draws their attention is that being human himself, if he could do all this, then they too can do this as human beings. And we can figure out ourselves as well that as we are on this path, we are understanding it and we are also practicing individually. We can see that it's not a difficult path. Only thing is the motivation, conviction, and continuing doing it. He refers to the laws of Allah and invites them to use their intellect and reasoning to alter their evil path of life. Just see the firmness and focus in the last part of the verse when it declares to them, وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَعَلَيْهِ أُنِيبُ. This whole striving on the path of Allah is placed within our reach only if we develop that insight to comprehend it. Because once we are convinced of it, once we feel that this is our need, this is our desire, then human beings never give up. Bring this change within your own psyche, and then things will become crystal clear. Two verses next, 1189 and 90, lessons from history provide evidence. وَيَا قَوْمِ لَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شِقَاقِي أَنْ يُصِيبَكُمْ مِثْلُ مَا أَصَابَ قَوْمَ نُوحٍ أَوْ قَوْمَ هُودٍ أَوْ قَوْمَ صَالِحٍ وَمَا قَوْمَ لُوطٍ مِنْكُمْ بِبَعِيدٍ وَاسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ ثُمَّ تُوبُوا عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ رَبِّي رَحِيمٌ وَدُودٌ. O my people, take care that in opposing me you do not resort to such an action because of which your end will also be like that of the people of Nuh, Hud, or Saleh, or like the nation of Lut, about which you are well acquainted because it is not that far in the past, nor are their destroyed habitations far from your place. Very important point noted over here, and we'll look at it in next slide as well, that sometimes people, they shoot at the messenger rather than paying attention to the message which he's trying to convey. You can remain protected from the destructive effects of your present wrong path in this way, that by abandoning this path, you come to the path of Allah. And by establishing the system of rububiyyat of Allah in place of the existing system of exploitation and corruption, seek the means of protection from it. That system of Allah bestows the means of nourishment in an extremely compassionate way. Understanding psyche of the opponents of Deen. There is an important aspect of the human psyche here to which the Quran has drawn our attention. Many times, due to an egotistic proclivity, people oppose the messengers, not fully appreciating the benefits implicit in the guidance of Allah. Here the messenger Shuaib is informing them that they may not like him as an individual. But the issue here is not about him, but about the law of requital of Allah and the consequences of their wrong path. We need to focus on that aspect. Do not shoot the messenger, pay attention to the message. He then points out to them the fate of former nations and their destruction with which these people appear to be well acquainted. This included the people of Nuh who were destroyed due to imbalances in their society, the people of Hud who used tyrannical power against the weak in the land, the people of Saleh who resorted to gross injustice in the use of natural resources of the land, and the people of Lut who resorted to sexual perversion in the land and caused severe imbalance in the society. It is possible that Messenger Shuaib also pointed to them all these evils and wrongs which might also be existing in that society of his, together with the issue of weight and not giving due to other human beings. This is still time to return to the path defined by the Wahi of Allah, and if they decide to do so, then the benefits associated with this path will fall in their lap. Further reflections on these two verses. In the second verse, the Quran has outlined those benefits associated with the path of Deen. Firstly, protection and security will ensue associated with following this path within the permanent values, and it's an evidence-based fact. This path will remove all forms of fear and grief which man-devised systems create, and this will lead to bringing out the best potentials of each member of the society. Without this path, these potentials will never emerge and will remain dormant within the depths of the human psyche. We as human beings have a fairly developed rational side of our brain. And if we use that and we use our imagination, and if we are dissatisfied with the world around us, then we can see that what Quran is telling is definitely a better world. And if we cannot, or we deliberately go against it, then it is our choice. Secondly, rububiyyat as a system will start to take shape and it will become evidence of its own success. Part of this process will be to become fully aware of the functioning of the law of requital and to refer to the permanent values on a continuous basis to ensure firm adherence to this path of rububiyyat. Thirdly, when the Quran has stated over here by stating Inna Rabbi Rahimun Wadud, we are briefed about two important attributes of the system of Rububiyyah, i.e., continuous development and growth of our latent potentials, and that is under Rahim. And then this leading to mutual affection and harmony, as noted in verse 3103. And if you remember in 3103, Quran says, وَتَعْصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. And then it says that you became brethren, you came together, your hearts were united. So that is an inbuilt benefit of the system of being. In fact, while we are making an effort to go towards that, even on this process, our hearts come together, because once we share the same value system, we understand the same value system, our confidence and trust in the system keeps increasing, keeps multiplying. 1191, ignore the message, attack the messenger. قالوا يا شعيب ما نفقه كثيرا مما نقول وإنا لا نراك فينا ضعيفا ولولا رهطك لا رجمنك وما أنت علينا بعزيز. Very interesting point here. They said, "Oh Shuaib, the first issue is that in whatever you are saying, many of those things are just not comprehensible to us." And that was a blatant lie on their part, because they understood it as the subsequent part of the verse tells it. Hence, the question of accepting them simply does not arise. Secondly, that you are not even in possession of such power and authority that as a result of this, we should accept your utterances compulsorily. So they knew what he's saying. The reality is this, that we are merely conscious of your family status. If these people had not been with you, we would have stoned you and you would not have been able to do anything to us. Some further reflections. This verse refers to some salient aspects of the psyche of those people who reject the guidance of Allah. And we observe this even in today's world. It is not that it happened then. Even in today's world, people use that kind of language. Firstly, since they create these imbalances and injustices in the society, hence they do not wish to comprehend those things which warn them about the consequences of their evil deeds. People who are beneficiaries of an evil system will rarely agree to reform it, because they don't see anything wrong with that, because it is giving them benefit. And religion provides authenticity for that, because then they relate it to Allah, that Allah is very kind to them, and that is why they are getting benefits. And we see that kind of language used, that I'm all right, Allah is very kind to me, because they are making a lot of money under the capitalist system. Secondly, they do recognize the wrongs of the system created and supported by them, and in their hearts and minds agree with the messengers of Allah. They also feel threatened by the warning from the direction of Allah, but they look at the weakness of the messengers from a physical point of view and think that their own physical strength is the means of power which they possess, and which will never lead to any decline. And this is a fact when people are healthy, and then they think that they are never going to die. It is only when they become very sick, they realize that how vulnerable they are. We can witness this around us, where physical power intoxicates those who hold the reins of power in the world. And this is an important point for us as students of the Quran, to keep an eye on this kind of psyche of our people. And when they display those kind of signs, it is better to move away from them. It's a waste of time telling them again and again. Just tell them once and then move away and let them think about it. As a final attempt to muffle the voice of the Wahi of Allah, they warn the messengers with death by stoning if he does not stop sermonizing to them. The interesting point is that they still value the status of the messenger within the society and are fearful that his worldly status, due to his family connections, may go against them. This is that state of a nation where their end is not far, and their elimination from the world with their physical death is brought forward. Verse 1192, Allah's Wahi helps to expose people. Qala ya qawmi arahti a'azzu alaykum min Allahi wattakhastumuhu waraakum zihriyan. Inna rabbi bima ta'maluna muhit. Shuaib replied, so this means that you have no fear of the law of requital of Allah, If you have any fear, then it is only of my kinfolk. And here the messenger made it very clear to them that he has understood their psyche, and he replies them and explains to them the way he has perceived them correctly. Now I understand that when you utter the name of Allah, that is merely as a custom. And we hear all kinds of words, inshallah, mashallah, alhamdulillah. And of course, among other religious people, they use similar kind of equivalent words. You have merely left it as an extra, so that when no other means remain, then it can be made use of. Otherwise, for help and support, your gaze is lifted elsewhere. Whereas if you had any vision, then you would have seen that the law of requital of Allah is encircling you from every direction. While these people are doing all this and opposing the system of being, they don't realize that days are passing. Days are becoming weeks, weeks are becoming months, and months are becoming years. And the law of requital is going to get hold of them at some near future. And in any case, they are going to die and leave this life. Expanding this verse further, the messenger Shuaib does not give up and gives a positive response to their line of argument. He tells them that firstly, my family and its influential status is of more concern to you than the message which I'm trying to communicate to you. This points to the materialistic psyche of the people under the man-devised systems where the question of higher values of life does not even arise. Success in worldly life is scaled according to possessions and the acquisition of physical accoutrements. Secondly, the repeated uttering of Allah's name is meaningless as deep down you have nothing to do with the guidance of Allah, and we also witness it in today's world. In fact, if we look at those of us who have come to this path after abandoning the previous paths of religions, can see that these are meaningless words which people use. In fact, they're very deceptive. They distract you from coming towards the Quran. And hence you have ended up providing evidence against your own selves or your own quicker demise from this world. And this point becomes very clear once we acquire that developed self which meets the requirements of the system of being. As we progress on this path, as our vision broadens, we understand that how wrong these people are and where do they stand vis-a-vis the life of the hereafter. Thirdly, let me make it evidently clear to you, Inna Rabbi bima ta'maluna muhit. The system of Rububiyyat is bound to come, and for that reason alone your deeds will become a cause for your elimination, and the next stage of Rububiyyat will then commence. And important is Inna Rabbi, when the messenger says that this system of Rububiyyat is the one which I am pursuing. And this system of Rububiyyat exactly knows from its future position where you stand and where your deeds stand. Bima ta'maluna muhit. Whatever you are doing, whatever deeds you are committing, it is encircling it, because the law of requital is making sure that you reap what you are sowing now. The guidance for us is to accelerate own efforts on the path of deen through salih deeds so that the law of requital could shorten the lives of those who do evil in Allah's world. Verse 1193, time of respite helps to build up own strength. وَيَا قَوْمِ اعْمَلُوا عَلَىٰ مَكَانَاتِكُمْ إِنِّي عَامِلٌ سَوْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ مِنْ يَأْتِيهِ عَذَابٌ يُخْزِيهِ وَمَنْ هُوَ كَاذِبٌ وَارْتَقِبُوا إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ رَقِيبٌ. In any case, I have understood that advice and warning cannot have any effect on you. Hence, I do not wish to say anything more than this, that you keep on working according to your program and let me work according to my program. The outcomes will very soon show who it is on whom the humiliating punishment of destruction descends and who is truthful and who is a liar. You wait and I will wait too. There is a strong point of support for us as students of the Quran that this path is long and this is a path which is connected with the life of the hereafter. So we should keep pursuing this path irrespective of the fact that how many have joined in and how many have left, and not to be distracted by that. The fact is that if one is convinced of this Sirat al-Mustaqim and its value system, then gradually the results of our deeds will manifest at some future time. And that is important, which comes out of this verse. Further comments, continuing from the previous verses, here the messenger Shuaib clearly and emphatically concludes his aim by declaring to them once and for all that he is not going to give up his mission. So one thing is, he has made it clear, that is, he and the Momineen with him have made it clear to his people that they are not going to give up their mission. So there is a clear line of demarcation between them and Momineen. He tells his people that he and the Momineen will continue on their path within the constraints of the society, and with the passage of time, they will gain strength in every respect. And that is part of Iman as well, that they will gain strength. And that strength initially gained very slowly, very gradually, very imperceptibly, but then it becomes stronger and stronger. But the biggest change comes within their own selves. While the people on the wrong path will decline in every respect, become weak through their own evil deeds. Ultimately, a stage will arrive when the evil consequences of the deeds of those who oppose the Wahi of Allah will catch up with them, i.e., the time of respite will come to an end, just as physical death ends the individual human existence at some point in time. Here is the sign of a developed self to which the Quran has drawn our attention. To be fully convinced of the truth of their own path of life, i.e., conviction acquired through Iman and Salih deeds, and to be working in consonance with other Momineen. The firm Iman that our evidence-based path is correct, and this is fully authenticated using the permanent values given by the Wahi of Allah. Last two verses for today's presentation. Finally, the law of requital ended the time of respite, verses 94 and 95. وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا شُعَيْبًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنَّا وَأَخَذَتِ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةُ فَأَصْبَحُوا فِي دِيَارِهِمْ جَاثِمِينَ كَأَن لَّمْ يَغْنَوْا فِيهَا أَلَا بُعْدًا لِّمَدْيَنَ كَمَا بَعِدَتْ ثَمُودُ. Consequently, when the time for the manifestation of results arrived, then according to our rahmat, we saved Shuaib and his companions who had accepted Iman with him, and the severe punishment of the earthquake overwhelmed those people who had resorted to transgression. And when the dawn broke, it was seen that they were lying in their homes, immobile and lifeless. And their habitations had become desolate and flattened in such a way as if no one had ever lived in them. See, the people of Madian became deprived of the bounties of life in the same way that before them the nation of Thamud became deprived. Concluding remarks in these two verses. Finally, the next stage arrived as highlighted by the messenger Shuaib and his companions, and the outcomes of the evil deeds of the people caught up with them. The time of respite ended under the law of requital, and physical demise arrived earlier for the people of the town. They had become the wrong choices which terminated their right to physical life. This is part of Allah's rahmat. It is a rahmat because unless this stage ends and the next stage starts, then the purpose and the aim of the Quran is not fulfilled. When he wants us to establish the system, and Momineen must succeed. And that is an important lesson over here. Shuaib and the Momineen with him were saved from this destruction as they had earned protection through their righteous conduct as per the law of Mashiach of Allah. This protection is inbuilt and is part of the system of Rububiyyat, which is available to Jamaat-e-Momineen for all times. Here, in these accounts, the Quran has not gone into further details of the life of the messengers and their companions. We have gone through the previous accounts as well, and over here, the Quran becomes silent. Secondly, all these events are noted in a concise form, whereas there are many, many years from the start of the dissemination of the message of Allah and the end of these nations. So that is the aspect we should keep in mind, that it is not 1 year or 2 years, it is many, many years. This is something we need to figure out using our intellect and reasoning within the context of the permanent values of the Quran. This aspect is part of the process of developing ourselves and is related to the higher level of being part of the Jamaat al-Momineen. And it's very patience testing, because once we have come to the message of Wahi, then we should not think that we will get quick results. And particularly if the world is quite messy and we have allowed this world to be like this for thousands, for over 1,000 years. So those effects will take time to go away. Secondly, people take time to absorb this message and to bring change within themselves. Conviction does not develop overnight. It is not that I have Iman and that is the end of it. One has to do a lot and for many years work on this path by doing solid deeds and by coming together, by sharing these presentations and by going through the Quran ourselves, by reading the books, by knowing the human psychology. So all these efforts are required to understand the world in which we live, and then we know where we are going in the light of the Quran. For example, in today's world, we should keep reflecting on the next stage and its shape as and when it arrives in the light of the guidance of Allah. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of healing.